In this lesson, we will learn how to evaluate sources for credibility in order to determine their usefulness in answering our questions. What does it mean to say that information is true? How often do we question what we read, hear, or see? Often we think that something is true if it agrees with our ideas. Psychologically, this makes us feel safe. In this lesson, we are going to learn some markers or indicators of credibility, a way for us to determine if the information we are looking at should be questioned. Sadly, this could lead to something called cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is the state of rejecting something that is factually true because it doesn't sit well with us. Here is an example. About 2 years ago, some bats decided to move into my attic. They would occasionally break out into the house and scare the living daylights out of me and my family members when we least expected it. While this was very exciting, we knew it was probably not safe nor hygienic, so we called a bat expert, the Batman, to find a way to safely remove the bats and prevent them from coming back in. It was very expensive, but no bats were harmed and they no longer took residence in our attic. Fast forward to a few weeks ago when we heard some scratching in the eaves of the attic. We also noticed a few dark, rice-like looking particles around the windows in our attic. Now, this evidence points to a reasonable conclusion that the bats had returned. But how? We had sealed off the entry points and removed the critters 2 years ago and spent quite a lot of money. It would be very inconvenient to have to do it all over again. I decided to ignore the evidence and believe that I was imagining things and the black rice was just dirt from the windows. I was experiencing the truth in front of my face, but I chose not to believe it because it would be inconvenient if true. I was experiencing cognitive dissonance. Now, the truth is that I did eventually end up calling the Batman again due to the fact that a bat flew right over my head when I was watching Netflix one night. Batman said there were indeed bats, but they were not coming in through the attic. They were flying in through an open window in my son's room. He likes to listen to crickets. We moved the bats once again and reminded our son to close his window. I finally accepted the truth. Why does all of this matter? As members of a democratic and civil society, it is important to critically consume information to determine if it is true or false, based on variables that could get past us if we're not careful. In other words, the more we learn, the more our ideas shift and change. If we are resistant to changing our thinking, exposing ourselves to information that sounds comfortable or makes us feel we are being agreed with, we might be missing out on the truth. And while some people say ignorance is bliss, ultimately, we will not be a strong society if we accept ignorance. So, bring on the markers of credibility so we can question the information presented to us and determine if it is usable in answering our question. What do we mean when we say a source is credible? Generally, it means, can we believe that the information is true? If a source is not credible, then we have no reason to believe it is true. If a source is somewhere in the middle, it is possible for a source to have some truth but some questionable information. If a source is very credible, we have every reason to believe the information is true. The first marker of credibility is author's expertise. Is there an author mentioned at all? Is their bio available? Do they work for a company that would benefit from us believing the information? For example, I might read that there has been a scientific study showing that I will lose weight if I drink more milk. When I look at the author of the article, it is the CEO of Fresh Farms Dairy Company. If I believe that milk will make me lose weight, I might drink more milk, which will benefit the Fresh Farms Dairy Company financially. I might then say the source is not very credible. On the other hand, if the same claim were made by a licensed nutritionist or medical doctor who has nothing to gain from me drinking more milk, the source becomes more credible. Sometimes I find information that looks truthful, but it turns out it might not be anymore because things change. For example, I might be wondering if it is safe to go to a party during this global pandemic. I really like parties. I really want to go to one, so I am scouring the internet for information that will tell me it is safe and okay to go. I find an article dated from February 2020 saying that as long as there are no more than 10 people at the party, it is safe for me to go. Yay! Except no. That information is no longer relevant, as the updated information, as recent as August, tells me that spending time in groups without maintaining 6 feet and wearing a mask will spread the COVID virus. I cannot trust the information from the February article. Now, what if I am looking for information on how to successfully grow tomatoes in my backyard? I really love salsa and I want to have a good crop this year. I find an article that tells me what the best soil is, how to hydrate and fertilize my tomato plants, and keep them regularly bug-free. I notice the article is from 2012. Wow, that article is outdated. Or is it? I know that conditions in growing tomatoes has unlikely changed in 8 years. Therefore, the article is still relevant in answering my question and is useful. When facts are corroborated, it means they are not contradicted by other credible sources. If I am questioning the truth of the information I am reading, it is helpful to do a quick check and see if other sources are saying the same thing. If the information in the source is cited, in other words, they tell me where the information came from, who said it, who discovered it, who published it, this is a good sign because I can check those original sources to see if they are saying the same thing. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that opinions are sometimes useful. Our question we are asking may be about what people think in terms of their opinions. Therefore, an opinion source will help us to answer our question. We need to remember that finding a balance of opinions will give us a true picture of what people think. In other words, we know an opinion is not what everyone believes, and it is not fact. Let's look back at my source that tells me if milk will help me lose weight. There are facts in the source, but none of them are cited. I decide to look for similar facts in other sources and find nothing that shows me that drinking milk will help me lose weight. I decide the source is not credible or useful. Now, if the source contains facts that are presented in the same way in other sources, the information is more likely to be true. Now, let's talk about opinions. I may be interested in finding out what people in St. Charles are saying about in-person school versus remote learning. I find numerous social media posts that show that some parents want their children in school because they think it is best for kids. This is an opinion, but it's what I was looking for, and it is not presented as fact. I may also find a number of parents that believe in-person school is currently not safe, and they want schools to provide the best quality remote instruction possible. This is a balance of opinions, which helps me to have a true picture of what parents in St. Charles think. If the information comes from a government agency, it is more credible. Remember, even if a president is in office, there are people working in federal agencies that remain in those jobs, even when a new president takes office. Government agencies are generally independent of politics and have an obligation to report truthful and scientific information. If the information comes from a university or school, it is also more credible. although we must still be aware that opinions can come from universities and schools. Remember to use the other markers of credibility and look for bias or author's expertise. If I am wanting to find out how many people in China work as farmers, I can use the CIA World Factbook, which gives me up-to-date statistics on the percentage of the labor force that works in agriculture. This data is collected by the CIA and is public. Sometimes it is hard to tell what the purpose of a source is. Often we have to combine this marker with the other markers. Can a TikTok be credible? Of course. We would want to evaluate the author's expertise, date and time, and cited factual information that can be corroborated, but if that's there, it makes the TikTok credible. Can a news story be untrue? Of course. If the author is trying to persuade us and the facts are not corroborated, then it is not going to be credible. One gray area is something called satire. Satire is a form of journalism used to make fun of a problem or issue rather than spread the truth. If the facts in the article are not corroborated, it is possible it is satire. One of the best ways to identify satire is to remember what specific sources claim to be satire, meaning their purpose is to entertain and make fun of a situation. It's good to know what sources are satire so that we do not share them as factual, true information. It's okay to share them for humor. There is no real formula for .com or .org or .gov in terms of knowing if a source is credible. You truly have to use the markers of credibility. To know the publication's purpose and evaluate it along with the other markers of credibility truly helps. For example, the purpose of a newspaper is to deliver journalism that is objective. However, there are some newspapers that have a reputation for leaving out facts that might lead you to change your thinking in a way that will benefit the company or not benefit the company. We call that bias. Bias is the tendency of a source to only present facts that would support a one-sided conclusion because it will benefit that company or author. To know if the information you are receiving is true, you will need to be aware of biases. But how can we possibly memorize all of the sources and their bias? Fortunately, we don't need to. Advance Media created an interactive media bias chart, which helps you to know the patterns associated with all of these sources. Some sources have a tendency to include facts that lean toward supporting liberal ideas and leave out a balance of facts. Some sources have a tendency to include facts that lean toward supporting conservative ideas and leave out a balance of facts. The higher up a source appears on the chart, the more cited factual information it uses. The lower it is on the chart, the more biased opinions it uses. Everything on the chart can be useful for a particular purpose, but when looking for corroboration, it helps to know the patterns of each source and focus on the center when looking for the least biased information. The link to this site is provided for you on Schoology. For example, Wonkette is located at the bottom and far left of the chart. This means it has a reputation for having persuasion, propaganda, and misleading information. It is not a very credible source. On the other hand, the Associated Press is known for having neutral or balanced information. It is a more credible source. When we think about markers of credibility, we can answer the question, is the source more or less credible? You will typically be asked to discuss 3 out of 4 markers of credibility as you look at sources during this year. To determine usefulness, we always want to go back to the question we are asking. Does the source just give me the easy answer, or does the source give me a true answer? Without a complete evaluation, we can't know for sure.